Welcome, dear viewers, to CouchWarrior TV on YouTube. I'm the CouchWarrior, and you are watching an Ashes update. So, things have gotten very busy this week, and I don't have time to produce story episodes like I normally would, but I thought this might be a good time for us to get a little bit of an update on what is going on with our characters. There have been a lot of questions about how these characters are constructed and so forth. So I think this will be fun. We've got a little bit of a treat in store. We're going to take a look at what is going on with Marl under the hood, so to speak. And we'll take a look at Shadeling in the same way. We're also going to take a walk down the street and have a look at the Carpathian Inn and get a little bit of an insider peek at Marl's Lorkhan Institute. So that is the plan. But for now, Marl is a little bit overdressed for the weather.
My cousin's out fighting dragons, and what do I get? Guard duty.
Guard duty. Sorry about that. Come, Mr. Whack. Let's proceed. Let's go to the inn. See what these scoundrels have been up to while we were gone. So the way that I play this out in the story is that Marl received some money in payment from Jarl Balgruuf, and he made a choice to invest that money in the Carpathian Inn. If you're not familiar with the Carpathian Inn, that was introduced a couple episodes ago in the Ashes storyline, specifically in Marl's storyline. And this is a really cool inn and tavern mod. It functions kind of like a hearth firehouse in that you can fix it up, you can clean it up, you can invest money in it. So Marl invested a little bit of his own time in helping them clean the place up, and then once it was cleaned up, he basically gifted them a good portion of his money, about 6,000 septums or so, to be invested in fixing the place up. So what I did is, off camera, I took those 6,000 septums and I used that money to purchase as much material as I could afford for $6,000, and I made all the upgrades I could to the space for that amount of money. And if we take a look right now, he's got 524 septums remaining. So that is all he has left of his fortune at this point. Fortune such as it was. But this, I think, there's a very specific reasons that I chose the Carpathian and feel like it is a great addition to the story. In part, I like the location. I like the idea of him occupying a place that is also occupied by others, where upkeep is kind of taken care of. The other cool thing is that this is a really great kind of a business investment. So as the inn does business and attracts customers and stuff like that, as an investor in that business, Marl will get a payment every so often, and he'll be able to put that money towards some of his endeavors. Instead of having to be focused on the business itself, he just acts as kind of a silent partner and gets to acquire some money from that. However, I think the most interesting thing is the assortment of interesting people that either work or live here at the inn. And I think in many ways, the caliber of people that are here are a great match for Marl and his personality. So I think we're going to see a lot of interesting things happen. Now, I did not have enough money to make all the upgrades that are possible here. So I invested as much as I could, and then over the course of time, I'll be making additional investments as Marl is out adventuring and acquiring money, or making money off the proceeds that the inn is generating. So let's go and have a look. All right. Now, this is officially going to be the address of not only Marl's personal residence, but the institution that he's referring to as the Lorkhan Institute, where he is going to do his research and stuff. So this is going to be the abode and the business both. We've got a mailbox where we can receive correspondence. Now this, of course, is Voltana.
How can I help?
And this guy, Gareth, he is a staff member. So he's basically a gardener, handyman,
The cat downstairs into the kitchen.
does some cleaning, stuff like that. And there's various staff members that can be hired here. At this point, I have hired all the available staff. So we actually have a groundskeeper, we've got a cook, and a bard as well. Now, a lot of the books that you see on these shelves and the armor and stuff like this is all stuff that has been acquired during adventures thus far. And so basically Marl is putting his books on these shelves, and he's putting anything that he's acquired during his adventuring on these mannequins, just trying to dress the place up. Here's the common room. There, of course, is one of the other Carpathian brothers, Jude. This is the bard, Audrey. And then this is Voltana's love interest, Seraphina, who has taken up residence here as well. Some kind of interesting features here, extra bedding and stuff. It's kind of cool. Just little details like that. Lots of storage, of course. I mean, it is an inn after all. And again, these are books that Marl has collected that we're kind of putting into the common space to just fill the shelves and stuff like that. There's Mr. Sero. He is now a resident here.
It's been a while, Outlander. Looking to unleash some havoc across Tamriel again?
He's looking good. All right, and then we get to guest rooms. This is Seraphina's room. And guests begin to appear as you finish out the rooms. I have not finished all of the rooms. I've finished most of the rooms. This guy, Gideon, he is available as a follower, but he's, you know, kind of a warrior and a braggart, and he hangs out in the common space a lot. Seems like kind of an interesting character. And here's our chef, Kair. He will make you home-cooked meals and stuff, much like his common and Hearthfire homes.
It's been a while, Outlander. Looking to unleash some havoc across Tamriel again?
Got a privy. Here you can actually use this to launch the race menu. It's kind of cool. And then these are Marl's private rooms. Pretty cozy. Got places to put all of our favorites. So basically what I've done is filled the place out, but then kind of decked it out with whatever stuff Marl has accumulated. So let's see. I also found a way to kind of get Whack Whack imported into Amazing Follower tweaks, even though technically he's considered to be a pet and not a traditional follower. I've found a way to kind of get him registered with AFT so that I can control him independently of the other characters, and I don't have kind of, you know, glitching and things like that going on, which has been good. So what I've done is taken all of these things that Marl's accumulated and kind of placed them in various areas that make sense. There's a lot of staves hanging up and things like that. These are all staves that he's acquired and has had for a long time. I've just taken them out of his inventory and hung them up, kind of organized them. Various robes and things that he's accumulated over time, so everything kind of has a place. Now, these chairs are not normally here. I actually placed these here using the campfire mod because there was nowhere really to just sit in front of the fire. So I put a couple of chairs in there. So, got the living area here. Kind of a place for everything, categorized storage. It's very nice. I really like it a lot. I like it because it's got kind of an apartment, sort of penthouse type of feel to it. It's not a great big vast house, but it's got everything that he needs. Plus, it's got a lot of characters also living under this roof that will be fun and interesting for him to interact with, I think. So we've got a fully appointed workspace out here where Marl can do all manner of different things. Build pretty much anything we need to. This barrel, this actually comes from Campfire as well. I placed that there myself. That's a water keg that I can use to fill all my water skins right here, which was kind of a nice convenience. So I built that and placed it there using Campfire. All right. So let's talk a little bit about this whole concept of the Lorkhan Institute. We've heard him express in previous episodes that he had a desire to set up some place that was kind of a place of learning. And part of the reason why I really like the Carpathian Inn is because it gives me a space in which to do that. So we've got this kind of nice balcony space here. And then this area. Now, this area is... I intentionally left this unfinished. This is an area where if you completely furnish it, what it does is it just creates a whole bunch of very specific display cases and things like that that are designed to let you display all the items and artifacts that a character could conceivably acquire while playing the game. I decided not to build those things and to forego all of that because what I'd rather have is this open space. And Marl is going to use this open space to kind of create a classroom environment, a place to do experiments and to hold lectures and to have meetings and stuff. And as you can see, it's not furnished at all right now. But we will be furnishing this over the course of time. And as you know, I'm using special edition here. We don't have the luxury of Jackson's Positioner, but we do have some other options that we can go with. So what we're going to do is I'm using a mod called Placeable Statics. And Placeable Statics basically provides sort of a spell-based system that allows you to acquire and move furniture and items around. The nice thing is that it also makes some furniture items available for purchase at general goods stores. So essentially what's going to happen, and this to me makes perfect sense from a roleplay perspective, is that Marl is going to be slowly accumulating money not only from adventuring but also from the proceeds of running a successful inn, and he will be taking that money, and then when he encounters items of furniture that he thinks might be useful, we'll be purchasing that furniture and we'll be coming back here and kind of outfitting this place to set up his institute. So he's acquired the space. but he has not yet acquired all the furniture and items that he needs to really successfully equip it. So we'll be doing that over the course of time, and I thought that would be kind of a fun role-playing experiment to just kind of go through that process. Now, the cool thing about it is we can also acquire furniture if we find it during the course of our adventure. It's possible for us to, take something that's in a bandit camp, for example, and acquire that piece of furniture and bring it back home and stuff like that. So we'll be doing some of that as well. And you can see I just got a message that there's 300 septims waiting for me. That's my share of the profits from the inn. So we'll go check that out. All right, you come for your primary investor. Everyone behave. So, tell me, what have we got?
Yes.
Has the inn made any money? I understand that it has.
Yes, Steve. Here's your cut.
Thank you. Excellent. Very nice. Now, how much money we make, of course, depends on how many guests we have. And how many guests we have depends on how many finished rooms we've got. So if we go down to the basement, this is where the kitchen is located, and then there's a few other interesting rooms down here. Here's the kitchen space. Now, of course, we've got Kair, who works in this space. We can come down here and buy things from him, like home-cooked meals and all that kind of stuff, but we can also use this ourselves. So if Kair is not busy in here, Marl could come down here and cook anything that he wants. Just kind of fun. Or just do dishes. Keep our city safe from germs. Wash your hands. Now this is an interesting space. Of course, lots of bookshelves here. This guy is actually a resident of the inn. He lives here permanently. His name is Regis, and he is also a trainer. You can buy things from him. So I think, assuming that Regis and Marl could actually get along with one another, he might be a good resource. So we'll see how that works out. And then I was able to get some materials and then kind of invest in this cool display area, which I really like. It's just really cool. It's like a little bit of Skyrim indoors, like a terrarium or something like that.
Better make this worth
It's
my while.
very cool. This here is Regis's room. Because this room is finished, that's why he's actually living here. And this room belongs to Mr. Sarrow. So we're understanding that Mr. Sarrow lives here. I did not finish this room. Mainly that's because I wanted this room to sort of be reserved for Mr. Sarrow. And if I had finished this room, it would have invited additional patrons into the inn. So from a roleplay perspective, it made sense that this room was kind of set aside for Teldrin Sarrow. So I did not finish that one out. It's just kind of an empty room. But the understanding is that that's where Mr. Sarrow lives, and we could use our placeable statics to outfit it with some furniture eventually, which I think we will do. So that is basically the walking tour of the Carpathian. Co-owned by the brothers Carpathian and Marl of Orkinlet. So it's very cool. I really like it a lot. And what I like about it too is that it's not finished. We're going to keep working on it. We're going to keep building. So I think that will be quite fun. All right, so let's talk a little bit about just kind of where Marl is as a character. Now, obviously, I did a lot of work off camera to set this place up, and that required a fair amount of smithing, enough so that Marl was able to attain level 10. So let's talk a little bit about what my plan is for Marl. Now, first of all, let's talk about the attributes on the bottom. I'm, of course, investing heavily in Magicka. I've invested most of our points in Magicka. My plan is to also invest periodically in health. Right now, I'm investing in health about every 5 levels or so. And then I do not plan to invest in stamina at all. The low stamina score will be kind of a reflection of some of Marl's ongoing health issues or his relative frailty in certain respects. So I think it's possible that he could have a decent health and a high Magicka, but, you know, have a lower stamina. So maybe he needs more sleep. Maybe he can't run at full speed for as long as his companions can. You know, things like that. He has to think more about what his travel options are, whether he's traveling by cart or by horse, things like that. Those are all considerations. So that's kind of what I'm doing there. Now, in terms of how we're outfitting him as a character, in terms of perks, his areas of focus are Conjuration, Destruction, Alteration, and Enchanting. And then later on, we will see, kind of to a minor degree, some investment probably in One-Handed. Now, as he gets up higher levels, I think we might also see a little bit of investment in very specific areas of alchemy. But really the core of who Marl is focused on Conjuration, Destruction, and Enchanting. And my interest in Enchanting is in part because I think that a lot of his research would be focused on the idea of enchanting, not the idea of creating enchants, but in understanding how enchantments are created and how they behave. One of the things that we understand about Marl is that he's investigating this thing he calls the Lorkhan particle, which is his name for basically small particles of magical power associated with the heart of Lorkhan that become attached to ash spewing from Red Mountain and blasted into the atmosphere. And the effects of that Lorkhan magic on the wildlife and the plant life and so forth in the areas where that ash eventually settles. To my mind, I sort of consider that whole concept sort of a form of enchantment by osmosis or enchantment by exposure. So this is ash that has been exposed to an extremely powerful magical artifact, and because of that exposure has some latent power in it. Now, an individual particle of ash would not have a lot of power, but when that ash accumulates in large amounts or is ingested by living creatures, who knows what kind of effect it will have. So this is really the focus of Marl's research, is this idea of the Lorkhan particle. And I sort of consider it to be some kind of low-level enchantment. So my thought was that investing in enchanting would be a good use of his resources to kind of reflect some of the research that he's going to be doing. Now, in addition to that, enchanting is important for Marl because of the way that I'm going to be playing him, the type of mage that he's going to be. And I think of Marl from a combat perspective as being sort of Gandalf-like, right? He's got a whole host of spells that he can use, but in combat, I really want to try and focus him on combinations of sword and staff and spells. So with that in mind, Ordinator provides some really nice perks in here that are designed to benefit staff-wielding mages. So I've been working my way up some of the enchanting tree here to kind of grab up some of those perks, or at least start to work my way up towards some of these perks that'll really benefit Marl when he's using a staff in combat, when he's creating a staff, when he's enchanting weapons, when he's repowering his magic items, things like that. So there's a lot of perks there that will really benefit us, but we've only begun to scratch the surface. Now, the other thing, of course, about enchanting is it's one of those crafting skills that will allow us to acquire levels pretty quickly, and those levels can help drive advancement in other areas as well. So under destruction, we are focused right now on kind of this combustion path. It seemed to make sense given his Dunmer background and some of the benefits, the racial benefits that Dunmer have specific to flame and fire related spells. So that's kind of what we're doing. We'll be doing elemental specialization and then kind of going up the fire or pyromancer portion of the destruction perk tree. On the conjuration side, this one is going to be interesting. I'm a little bit more open on the conjuration side of things. I'm going to base my perk selection kind of on what we encounter during game. So there's a lot going on in the conjuration tree here. Some of it has to do obviously with bound weapons. I don't see us going down that track, but when it comes to conjuring creatures, conjuration spells, things like that, there are different areas here. One area, of course, is going kind of down that necromancy or undead path. The other one is this kind of plane style magic where you're focusing more on conjuring Daedra and things like that. So I'm going to sort of reserve judgment on what additional perks we select here until I see what actually happens during the story. If we find that he is gravitating toward certain things more than others, then we'll just kind of meander our way through this one. I'm not, at this point, overly concerned about what our path is going to be here quite yet. Now you can see that we have taken this Bone Collector perk. This is what is allowing us to collect samples from Lorkhan infested individuals. And it is worth mentioning that I can basically collect bone samples or body part samples from any enemies that we kill in game. But I have created, for the purposes of my role play, a rule that basically states I am only going to collect body parts from individuals that we have confirmed are infected. And we confirm that they are infected with Lorkhan particles when we hear that whisper, right? And they glow gold, and Marl goes after him, and he dispatches these Lorkhan-infested people. He will be taking samples only from them. That will limit the usefulness of this. It doesn't limit the usefulness, but it slows down how much we can use it. So basically what this does is it allows us to collect these bone samples, and then once we have enough samples, we can go to some specific locations in Skyrim, and we can use the facilities at those locations to turn these bones into skeletal warriors that will fight for us. So this, in part, is a perk that I am selecting as part of a roleplay device, but then also as kind of a reflection of his ongoing research. He's gathering samples, then he's going to do something with those samples. He's going to try some experiments, and we'll see how that kind of affects the storyline. And then there is, in addition to Bone Collector, there is a whole series of really cool perks that are associated with this idea that you're creating minions rather than conjuring them. And there's something about that is appealing to me, because not only are they creatures that can help you during your adventures, but it has a distinct feel of some kind of an experiment. And because the creation of these creatures is centralized at certain specific locations, that also has sort of the side effect of creating this locational type of restriction that feels like it fits this concept of Lorkhan particles in the ash settling in the soil and making some places or some locations in Skyrim more rich with power than others and stuff like that. So that's really a set of perks that I'm taking as a way of kind of expressing this idea of his research. Alteration. We are going to be investing in alteration primarily because, at least now anyway, that the practicality of these spells is pretty significant. So we just want to make sure we're investing so that we can use those to good effect, because in many cases those alteration spells will save our lives. So that really brings us to the idea of one-handed. One-handed I'm not worrying about too much. He does use the sword, but having him be a low-level sword user makes perfect sense. He was trained as a kid, and now he's coming back to the skill. So he's going to be slowly coming back to this skill. But the focus of this will not be to make him a warrior. The sword will really be designed as a complement to his magical abilities. I do not see Marl wearing armor, and going down that more traditional mage or spell sword type of route, but I see it being a practical tool that he will use in very specific ways to complement his staff usage and his spell usage and some of the other things that he's doing. So that is the rundown, ladies and gentlemen. I think a pretty good review of Marl and where he is at as a character. Now, let's have a little bit of talk about the Shadeling and where he's at. All right, let's talk about the Shadeling. Well, as you can imagine, at his level, the Shadeling is slightly more complicated when it comes to setup. And I know that there are a lot of you who have been waiting for quite some time to get kind of a full rundown on what I've done with this character in terms of skills, perks, and all of that good stuff. So let's go over it. All right. So now the interesting thing here is that I have invested heavily in Magicka, and my decision to focus in alteration on this idea of innate magic was something that I did late in game. If I had to do it all over again, understanding that I was going to have a finite amount of Magicka, that in other words, that I was going to take a perk that did not make Magicka a concern, I would have invested my points differently. However, at the same time, from a role-playing perspective, it actually works out pretty good, because one of the things that we've done several times is referred to Shadeling as a glass cannon. And what that means is he's extremely powerful, he's got a lot of killing capacity, but he's also extremely fragile. This is a character who, if I am not careful, if I'm not, very methodical about the way that I launch my attacks, he can be one-shotted by a bandit with a bow. His health is just over 200, and that's with enchantments and so forth going on. So, something to consider there. If you're thinking about doing something similar for yourself, you may want to not invest so much in Magicka, focus those points on health and stamina, understanding that eventually you're going to be taking alteration perks that will make the need for Magicka completely moot. And so something to consider there. But Alteration for this character is pretty important. Obviously, we've gone to innate magic. From innate magic, we went to chosen one, and this is where we took the option to have 4 slots that recharge in combat, and then warrior prophet. This is just a perk that helps us out so that we get some better combat bonuses if and when we run out of magic, which can be extremely helpful if we find ourselves completely out of charge and in a pinch in hand-to-hand combat. Okay? Again, Ordinator perk overhaul. Really? All right, so this is critical. Also understand that I am not using the most recent version of Ordinator. The most recent version of Ordinator does not have innate magic. It has another concept in place of innate magic called Vancian magic, which works a little bit differently. It's very similar in that you get a finite pool to work from, but the mechanics for how recharging works and all that stuff is a little bit different. So you may want to do a little bit of research on that, figure out what the difference is, and then determine if you want the most recent version or if you want to go back one and use the kind of innate concept. Now I'm also using some resistances here. This alter self resistance, it allows you to increase your resistance to certain things. Because of how this character is constructed, I already have some built-in immunities when it comes to cold, so I selected some immunity bonuses when it comes to flames and shock. Alter Self here. Again, this is another one that I would do very, very differently if I were doing this again. Here, I chose to invest in Magicka. I increased Magicka by 50 points, kind of assuming that I was going to be using a standard model for Magicka. But when it came down to making perk choices based on my roleplay objectives, innate magic just made more sense. And then that gets me up to this nullifier. He radiates a dampening field that prevents enemies within 25 feet from regenerating Magicka and stamina. Okay, this is a reflection of what I would consider this concept that he is sort of a black hole in the pattern. He is like a black spot in the middle of the pattern of Aetherius, and he nullifies magic at the same time that he uses it. So, to me, this idea of the nullifier, or having this enhanced ability to resist magic, was kind of a cool sort of reflection of this concept that we've talked about with the Shadeling, of kind of absorbing the magic around him. So that was kind of in part a practical thing, but also in part a role-playing decision. Anchorite, this was a perk that I took recently. This is where you can kind of create a nexus of power. So I took this perk and I set his nexus of power to be in Shriekwind Bastion. In other words, a lot of his magical powers are more powerful when he's within a certain radius of his nexus, which is his lair, which makes perfect sense. So again, that was a perk that I selected for role-playing purposes primarily. Okay. Some basic enchanting. Not a lot of investment here. The key to this character, the key to Shadeling, is really alteration, destruction, and illusion. Okay, so if we look at destruction, we've done the destruction mastery. We've done the destruction dual casting, of course. Okay. Force of Nature is a must. We took this one mainly because we wanted to get up here to elemental specialization, and in elemental specialization, the Shadeling has specialized in frost magic. We know that about him. Okay. And then we went up this portion of the tree here where we're really specializing in perks that are focused on increasing our damage when it comes to using these frost-based spells. And we're increasing our damage by not only giving us, you know, some perks that buff our damage, but perks that also have an impact on the frost resistance of our enemies and allow us in certain circumstances to either nullify frost resistance or find ways to punch through frost resistance, which is pretty cool. Okay, then of course, illusion. Illusion is a huge one here. This character is very, very much about illusion. So illusion mastery, illusion dual casting, those are no-brainers. Okay. Quiet before the storm. All the spells you cast from any school of magic are silent to others. Okay. I took one level in this. The level above this allows you to apply this to shouts as well, but I have not had any intention of this character using shouts, so I refrained from worrying about that one. God, I hate that. Navigating these perk trees is a pain in the ass. Okay, so at this point you've got some options. There's kind of three different primary routes you can take up through the illusion tree. One is commanding presence, imposing presence, and then this kind of bartering idea where you're kind of focused on either charming people or causing people to fear you. Commanding presence is this. It talks about this this aura of mystical nobility. This is really designed, I think, primarily to help out characters who want to impact not only the enemy, but to have some kind of a positive impact on those people that are fighting with them or for them. I did not see Shadeling as being a character who would have a lot of followers, so I thought that it was more important to invest in imposing presence. And we've seen this played out in roleplay as well, where he's intimidated other characters, different things like that. All right. So at that point, I'm starting to pick other things now that will benefit this idea of imposing presence. So wilting is kind of cool. Those affected by a calm spell or an effect similar to a calm spell within the radius of imposing presence lose 200 points of armor and 50% magic resistance. So this is going to apply to the vanilla calm spell, but this would also apply to any damage that I do to an enemy that I have already either kind of captured their attention with either a gaze rune or compelling whispers. It's a calming-like effect, not necessarily just a calm spell. Lord of Illusions. Illusion spells are 25% more effective for each ally or enemy within 40 feet under the effects of the mind-affecting calm. This one I chose because what we have seen the Shadeling do many times is take over the minds of his enemies and cause them to fight each other. That perk will directly benefit those who are fighting for me at the time under whatever spell effects I've used. And then we've got a number of other ones here. You can look at these for yourself. I'm not going to go into, exact detail on each one, but I wanted to give you a general idea of the direction that Shadeling is going up through here. I haven't determined whether or not there are going to be more investments in the future in the illusion tree. I suspect that there will, but I don't have my eye on any particular perks. I'm just going to sort of take it as it comes. So if I have a perk to spend, I'm going to go in there and poke around and see if there's anything worth spending on. Okay. Now, the other two things that are critical here, obviously, are sneak, but then also light armor. We've talked about this before. The Shadeling's abilities as a hand-to-hand combatant come directly from the light armor perk tree. So I've done a couple of things here. I've invested in perks and light armor that will help his damage with his fists. But I've also invested in things that will help kind of reinforce his armor and protect him a little bit. So there are a lot of different things going on here. I like to select perks that give him benefits for mobility. In other words, there are some perks here that will give you a reduction on incoming damage if you're moving, or they'll benefit your healing capabilities or something like that if you're moving, things like that. The kinds of perks that reward a character for being mobile and moving through combat constantly and not being a defensive fighter or a stand and fight type of brawler. So Shadeling is all about constant movement. He's not a camper. So I'm trying to pick things that will help with that. Now, the other thing that I'm doing is also trying to do combinations of perks that will benefit his hand-to-hand damage. Okay? And by that, what I mean is I'm taking a lot of perks here that will just kind of help with fisticuffs. But in addition to that, when I'm looking at things like Destruction, for example, because I've got an elemental specialization in Frost, and I've taken a number of other perks that provide benefits around Frost-related damage, there are perks here under Light Armor that will help us in other ways. So if we look up here, not at Breaking Waves, but Hissing Dragon, you may choose a damage type: Fire, Frost, Shock, Poison, Disease, or Sun. Unarmed attacks unleash a wave that deals the chosen damage type to all targets in front of you. Requires 2 free hands. Does not activate while sneaking. So if you've been watching closely, either Ashes 2, or also you can see this effect in play during the Shadeling for Hire episodes, where you will see him throw a punch and you'll see kind of a little, a blue wave project out from his fists. That is the Hissing Dragon power at work. So because I am specialized in Frost, obviously I chose Frost here, which means that every punch that Shadeling throws, as long as he's got both hands dedicated to unarmed combat, are going to do extra damage. So, this is critical. People are asking me questions about, how does he do so much damage with his bare hands and stuff like that. This is part of it. But this is also why I'm very preoccupied with making sure that when I go into hand-to-hand combat, I've got both hands free. If I don't have both hands free, then this bonus will not apply. So when I get into those situations where I'm trying to do my double tap and go from equipping spells to equipping fists, I get frustrated sometimes because there's not a clean transition sometimes to the bare fists, and I really need to have both hands free in order for some of these things to actually work. So really what you want to do is take a look at Ordinator, see what it has to offer, and see how you can make these things stack. That's how this is working. That's how I'm getting damage. In addition to that, I've also taken the time to enchant some gear. So, get yourself a set of gauntlets that do good damage to start with. Smith them up, enchant them with the pugilism, fortify unarmed combat. You can get that from the Gloves of Pugilism as part of the Thieves Guild questline. Disenchant those puppies and make sure you've got that enchantment on your gauntlets. That will help. All right. And then there are some certain things here that will also benefit. So here, for example, all destruction spells and scrolls are 3% more powerful per level of sneak if the target is not detected. Okay? This is one of those that really is a huge benefit as well. So if I cast think about that, right? That is how I'm able to do so much damage with the Frost Cloak spell. I've got this specialization in Frost. I go into sneak mode. I cast the Frost Cloak spell and then sneak around the battlefield. I'm stacking a whole bunch of different bonuses because of the way that I've spent my perks, and also because of the way that I'm just behaving tactically in combat. It makes a big difference. The sneak attack, this will apply to one-handed weapons, but also sneak attacks with any other weapon or fists deal 25% more damage. So this obviously is a great way for me to start getting sneak attack damage bonuses with bare hands. Makes perfect sense. Problem solver. Sneak attacks deal 10% more damage for each 200 points of health the target has, up to 50% more damage. So this is a nice one to have if you're trying to do, sneak-based or stealth-based attacks on high-level enemies, things like that. And breaking invisibility with a power attack is guaranteed a critical strike that deals 50% more damage. You can see how these things stack. So if I'm, engaging these stealth-based attacks at the same time that I'm getting benefits on certain types of magical attacks, then you can really dish out a lot of damage. But it is all dependent on this sort of stealth and first strike capability, right? So I certainly do not have any qualms whatsoever about using these perks to my advantage, especially when I understand that this character, Shadeling, if he gets caught, if he gets caught out of stealth, if he finds himself in that kind of a situation, I can be one-shotted by a bandit. And I'm playing at legendary difficulty, so even a high-level bandit using a hunting bow with steel arrows can one-shot Shadeling. So you have to be very cognizant at all times of whether or not I have the tactical advantage. So I don't worry about stacking some of these things. Shadeling is powerful, but rarely do I feel like he's overpowered. So I don't know. That's how I look at it. Then some of these are other things. I definitely we're going to see more investments in stealth. There are some really cool things that I would love to try. Smoke Curtain seems like it could be really fun and fit Shadeling's mystique, if you will. So definitely there will be some more investment in sneak. Now, as far as lockpicking, pickpocket, all of that stuff, I've not invested in any of those whatsoever. And I think that it is worth mentioning here that Shadeling is a character that was created by me from the very start to be a creature of magic. And I created him artificially and cherry-picked exactly the things that I wanted. In other words, this is not a character that was played from level 1 up to 50. He was designed to be a magical creature from the start of the story, which means that I created him as a first-level character, and then I advanced him in levels using console commands and picked very specifically the perks that I wanted. If I were to create Shadeling starting at first level up to 50, this perk selection would probably look very, very different. I can guarantee you that we would not see, an alchemy score at 20. We would probably not see a low smithing score, things like that. Because some of these critical crafting skills would have been used as a leveling engine, getting levels in smithing and alchemy and enchanting and stuff like that would have been used as a way to gain levels to, so that I could advance some of these other skills like alteration, illusion, and destruction up as high as I felt like they needed to be for this character to be effective in the story as I wanted to portray him. So, please understand that this is a character who was advanced in level artificially. If you're going to play a character like this from level 1, they'll look a bit different than all this. So, important to note. I think, as with any mage, training is key. Taking advantage of your training options in game will be key to you advancing any of these skills up to high level. Anything approaching level 100 is going to require training and investment in training, I think. These skills are really hard to advance organically up to 100. So that's kind of where we're at with that. Now, there's some other things at play here as well. When creating the Shadeling, I was really trying to craft a character that is unique. And if you've been following the story, you understand that in the story, Shadeling is some kind of a vampire hybrid. And so the key for me was figuring out how to create a vampire hybrid. So what I did is I'm kind of simulating that by, when creating this character, he was basically made into a vampire artificially. He was made into a vampire by using console commands, which has a slightly different overall effect than if you were to become a vampire lord, or you were to become a vampire just through, the simple, vampire bite and sanguine vampirus disease route. So he does have some vampiric abilities that affect things like resistance to cold and disease and stuff like that. But he doesn't behave quite the same as a traditional vampire would if you were to acquire vampirism just naturally in game. This was done intentionally so that I could create a character that had some of the characteristics of a vampire without actually being a vampire, because if you're following the story, you understand that the Shadeling is supposed to be a vampire that was transformed magically into something else. In other words, he doesn't feed on blood or life force. He feeds on power. He feeds on magic. He feeds on the power that he finds in magic items, in magic objects and artifacts, in soul gems, stuff like that. So he is kind of parasitic or vampiric, but what he feeds on is different than a traditional vampire. And I achieved that by using console commands to turn him into a vampire. So there are some powers that he has that are similar to what a vampire might have. But he does not have, he's not a vampire lord, he does not have a shape change type ability, nothing like that. Let's see, as far as items go, we'll take a quick look. There's some things here that have been customized. So we're making heavy use of the ritual armor of Boethia. If you haven't checked it out, I definitely recommend checking it out. Okay, so on the armor, I'm doing Fortify Health. On the boots, I'm doing Muffle. On the gauntlets, we've got our bonus on our unarmed strikes. Okay, and this is using the Fortify Unarmed Combat enchantment placed on these gauntlets, and then the gauntlets do 20 points of damage plus whatever the enchantment does. I have not upgraded any of his armor. In other words, I have not smithed up or improved any of his armor, and you'll notice none of these are listed as fine or legendary or anything like that. So if I were to do that on the gauntlets, for example, he could do even more damage, but he does not. The Ritual Shroud of Boethia, this is the default enchantment that is on this armor when you acquire it. It's got this shroud that has this magical capability. You are able to move quietly while sneaking, and opponents that get too close will be slowed by despair. This is the enchantment that is on this item by default. I believe that the rest of the set comes unenchanted, so you can put your own stuff on it. But there's something special about the shroud that the mod creator put this on there. And it kind of behaves very much like the ebony mail. So when you go into sneak, you can hear that kind of poofing sound. It behaves in sort of like an alarm. So if enemies are present, I will hear that sound, or when I go into stealth, I'll get that sound. But if I'm standing normally like this and enemies come close and I'm under threat, that sound will also kick off, which serves like kind of a nice alarm to let me know that there's a threat nearby, which I really like. Okay, so I've combined the ritual armor of Boethia with a hood that is, by the way, all of these things that I'm mentioning you can find in the Immersive Armors mod by Hoth Trooper. All this stuff is in there. The hood is actually coming from the Ebon Steel armor set. It's the light armor hood from the Ebon Steel armor set. I picked this hood very specifically because it was constructed in such a way that it did not clip with the mask that I'm using. And then if you'll notice, he's also wearing a scarf, but the scarf is black. The scarf that he is wearing is a scarf from, what is it? I forget what it is. There's an armor set in Immersive Armors. I think it's called the Apotheosis armor or something like that. It has a red scarf and a red hood. I grabbed up the scarf, and then everything he's wearing has been retextured by me. I've retextured every item so that it all kind of matches together. Darkened all the blacks so they're the same shade. And so everything here has a custom texture on it, including the mask. Now the mask is the Jack of Blades mask. That is available for both regular Skyrim or Skyrim Legacy and Special Edition. And it has been retextured by both myself and Katie Bryson. Thank you, Katie, for your assistance. She created the initial texture, and then I did some recoloring of the texture, and I've added a stripe here. But we've seen very different variations on this mask over the course of time, and that is one thing that will be changing a lot where Shadeling is concerned. The mask. The mask is in some ways an expression of his personality, so he will be changing the mask on a frequent basis as part of the role play, but then it also kind of mixes things up, and it's kind of fun to play around with. How Shadeling might express himself personally or emotionally through what his mask looks like at any given time. So that is it, my friends. That is kind of the rundown on Shadeling. Again, the pieces that are really critical to making the Shadeling work are a host of mods from Anai Scion. In order to make a character like Shadeling work, you need the Apocalypse spell package, and you need the Ordinator perk overhaul, both by Anai Scion. If you were to get, only a couple of mods, those are the crux of it. Those are the core ones. And then in addition to that, there are a couple other things. I'm using Imperious Races, also by Anai Scion. And then, of course, the armor, which is coming from Immersive Armors. You can also, if you're interested, you can also get the ritual armor of Boethia on its own as a standalone armor. That is available as a standalone as well if you don't want to get the entire Immersive Armors package, which has a ton of stuff in it. All really great stuff. But if you just want this armor, then you can get it as a standalone. Well, everybody, I want to thank you. This has been kind of a lengthy update, but I think it was overdue and very necessary. I hope you found this useful. I have enjoyed presenting it to you, and I want to thank you. I will see you next week when the story will kick off once again. And thank you so much for your patronage of my channel. If you are interested in supporting CouchWarrior TV and getting access to all of Shadeling's adventures in the Ashes 2 storyline, you could do that by going to patreon.charactercrusade.com. Thank you all for your time and attention, and I will see you next time.